You're listening to The Real Short Box, a comic book podcast made for geeks by geeks.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming out and listening to The Real Short Box. My name is Donald.
My name is Supreme Chancellor Kevin.
And of course, I'm Darren.
And Kevin, what do we got today? We got something special, don't we?
We have a special interview with a very special writer, a special gentleman by the name of Russell Nohelty. Did I say that right, sir?
You did. I always worry, but it was correct.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I'm sure you also appreciate how he made sure to accent the second syllable of your last name, Nohelty.
Yeah.
Kind of like Nick Nolte.
Or the Price is Right, where they're like, come on down.
Come on down.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Russell.
Well, it's better than...
No, please,
Yeah, absolutely.
go ahead.
As I said, it's better than doing the second syllable, which is what most people do, which is Nohelty.
Oh!
I
Wow.
write dark fantasy and horror, so I didn't realize that hell was in my name and that Cell was in my first name, and I also teach a lot of people how to sell better. So I guess my name just worked itself out into what I do now.
That makes sense, because reading your work, it's a little dark at times, for sure. Definitely.
So Russell, I'm going to start off asking a question now. Where are you from originally, sir?
Born in Jersey, raised in just outside of D.C. in Northern Virginia, and then I've been in L.A. since 2008.
Oh, which part of Northern Virginia?
A little town called Woodbridge. It used to be the biggest outlet mall in the country. Potomac Mills Mall was like our big claim to fame. It's about 30 minutes south of D.C.
So my next question for you is actually going to be, what was your profession before you started really heavily investing in your comic book art?
Well, I worked at a Sprint dealership called L2 Wireless right before I went out on my own. But before I actually started writing comics, I worked in movies and TV. I bummed around a lot. I moved in 2008, and I started writing comics in 2010. So those 2 years were quite. I guess I would say I wrote movie and TV stuff, but not very well. I did direct and write a movie, which became a web series called Connections, which is on YouTube. I directed a pilot for a reality show called Sabres and Roses. I wrote some shorts that got produced and such, but it wasn't until I found comics that I actually started having any writing success.
So you moved here in 2008, right in the beginning of the writer's strike. Talk about some bad luck.
Right in the beginning of the writer's strike, at the height of the recession, it was a horrible time to be in LA. I wrote ICHABOD, which is, I think what we're here to talk about, at the worst time in my life, right around that time where, like, literally nothing was happening. My manager couldn't even book me on generals, which is sort of, it's the meeting that, like, anybody will take in Hollywood because they just want to meet new writers, and, like, I couldn't even get that. Like, a general is basically, like, you sit down in someone's office and just talk about yourself as a writer. Like, basically it's a first coffee date, and like I couldn't even get that. Like, which is the literal lowest rung of meetings you can get in Hollywood.
It's kind of interesting because about that time I was working on a movie called G.I. Joe, and for people that don't out there in the podcast land that don't know this, if we're in the middle of a writer's strike, there are no rewrites allowed to be made on any WGA properties. So, a lot of people still dog that G.I. Joe film, but they don't understand. They weren't allowed to make any corrections, and this thing could have been written in 1987 for all we know, and not updated.
Just like that Bond film, Quantum of Solace, was also caught up in that.
I don't think there was any saving that movie, by the way, the G.I. Joe movie.
Go Joe. Anyway, back to Russell here. So, okay, so then you wrote that, so you started writing, you said, in 2008, ICHABOD?
I started writing in ICHABOD in 2010 after 2 years of being in LA and basically having no movement in any But besides that, like, there was almost nothing happening. What happened was I wrote so I was, like, broke at this time, right? Because, like, 2 years of basically not work. Like, so it was the height of the recession, so no one was even hiring at, like, Starbucks or Walmart.
Yeah,
Right.
That's true.
And no one was hiring because of the writer's strike and such for 2 years. So, like, there was literally basically no work. I had not worked in 2 years, probably. And so I had scraped together a little bit of money to do this book called The Wannabes, which was about fake superheroes that get real superpowers. And it was adorable. And I still love it to this day. I hired an artist and a team in the Philippines to handle it. And they took care of all the art, 8 pages. And I took it down to San Diego Comic-Con in 2010. I was like, this is the one, man. I'm going to pitch this around, and, like, I'm going to get a publisher, and, like, it's all going to happen. And literally every publisher told me no that I pitched it to. Most of them were not even polite enough to laugh in my face. Some of them were. A couple of them said, why would I make a superhero book, a YA superhero book, when, like, Marvel and DC are doing that? Now, this was before Irredeemable and Invincible took off, and, like, we now have many, many comic books that are independently produced outside of Marvel and DC that are superhero books, but back then, no one was doing YA, and no one was doing independent superhero books, and those are kind of like 2 pretty big markets right now. So I came back from San Diego Comic-Con in 2010, and I was dejected. I had no movement in getting a job, and I had no movement with my movie and TV projects. The options that I had all fell through. So I made a promise to myself that if I was going to make a book that people rejected, they were really going to reject it for real, legitimate reasons. And I didn't know who the hero was going to be of that story, but I was going through some stuff.
And so
I felt like, so Ichabod is a psychopath that escapes a mental asylum and becomes a monster hunter. But the underlying ethos of the book is he's a human that society has written off, who people think can't be redeemed, who they basically throw in a padded cell and throw away the key.
Mm-hmm.
And so the underlying crux of the story was, can somebody who society has basically written off redeem themselves and become a hero? And Ichabod is really about somebody who becomes a hero, not despite the broken bits, the things that he thinks are broken about him, but because of it.
Yeah, so it's a very therapeutic writing there for you. We create this character.
Right, and Kevin and I actually, we had quite a bit of a debate back and forth. The whole essence of the story, like you were saying, is this the character Ichabod, and whether or not he's legitimately crazy or if he's having these delusions, fantasies, what you may call it. It goes back and forth between him in at one point he's in a real time where he's a bus driver, another point he's in an asylum, and then another point he's in a post-apocalyptic world hunting monsters outside of that asylum with people that he had thought he had killed in the past. So Kevin and I went through a bit of a debate on as to, is this guy really nuts, or is he just really super creative, or is he maybe a bit of both?
Or is it just up to the reader's interpretation?
Well, when I wrote the first arc, I wanted to leave it up to the reader's interpretation of whether it was in his head or not. Since now we're doing a second arc, and I'm planning to continue it for at least 5, if not 7 trades, I'm going to have to, like, tell everyone the truth at some point. I'm not ready to do it yet, but I think the reason that Ichabod endures is because there's that question.
It's like Wolverine was, his history, where he came from, and then once people found out, I think Wolverine lost a little luster there, as far as that. But the whole hunt for who he was or what his history is created this appeal, and that's what continuously generates buzz. So
It's not the mystery.
right, there's a mystery there. So it seems like you're going to start on unfolding pages and letting out little bits and pieces here and there as we continue to go. And you gave us
the sixth issue, which is the last issue that I'm offering during the Kickstarter. Like, it explains almost all of it. Like, it explains all of the things, at least from one character's perspective or a couple of characters' perspectives, of what like happened in the apocalypse, who the voices are in his head, and basically everything. The story for a long-running series can run on this conceit. It's a conceit that's very fun for 4 issues, but in order to break it up for 20 or 30 issues,
we got to know.
You can't keep wondering if he's in the apocalypse or not. Like, while I do like move between these worlds still, it can't be the central conceit of the story anymore. There has to be some explanation, some questions answered, some new questions posed, some story going, some story moving forward. Otherwise, you're just telling the same book for 6 arcs, and that gets just as boring as not answering the question was exciting for that one arc.
Right.
So the second arc, it opens up a lot more questions, and it opens up the world. And the hardest part of this whole process was that I didn't know how to continue Ichabod, because for years, Ichabod was this conceit. Is he killing monsters, humans, or it's all in his head the whole time? Like, that was the conceit of Ichabod, of like what the book was about.
Right.
And it wasn't until I started pulling apart what Ichabod was really about when I went back to write it and when we started developing it for TV that we came upon, like, the real thing Ichabod's about is this, like, can somebody redeem themselves? Can somebody bring hope to the hopeless? And can that person be the most unlikely hero imaginable? And that became what the crux of the story was. Less about, although I do move between these ideas. Again, the second arc, he definitely still goes back, and he still has these times where he's in other places and he doesn't know how he got there. And I'm going to be teasing that for at least the next arc or so. But the important part of Ichabod is that it's a chosen one narrative, where the chosen one is the least likely person possible.
Right.
And the tragedy of Ichabod is that if he does what he's supposed to do and ends the apocalypse, then he goes back to a world that he doesn't belong. The only place that he can be a hero is in the end of the world. And yet, he still has a drive to do the right thing, even if it means at the end of this whole thing, he goes back to a world that considers him a psychopath.
Right.
Now, I have a quick question for you. How did you meet Renzo Podesta? How did you hook up with him? Because the penciling and the artwork is very unique.
So it was pure dumb luck. I was not very far into my career, and I posted on a site called Digital Webbing, and I got like 4 responses. And I was about ready to go with another artist who I liked his work. I wasn't like super in love with it, but I liked it enough, and I was rookie enough to like settle for this person. He's a good artist, just like did not catch quite the tone and the style that I was going for. And then at like the last minute, Renzo sends me this page, which is actually page 4 in the book, in the first volume. The first issue, the 4th page, was the sample page that Renzo sent me. And he sent me the inks first, and then a couple days later he sent me the colors. And I just fell in love, and I was like, I have to have this guy. He's the perfect person.
You gave us a little sneak peek into 5, and I must say it does pick up right kind of where it left off, and it does show us where you're headed in the story that you're going to be trying to tell, and it does introduce a couple of new characters too, and creatures as well. So it's going to be an exciting time. I don't know all what you've told people in general, so I'm going to keep it rather tight-lipped. But
Well, we introduced my favorite character of the whole series so far that I've written, which is Necromonica. She's our Gandalf. She's the
Right,
first witch
okay.
of the apocalypse.
yeah,
The thing with the first volume is it's very, very, very contained. It feels like a psychological horror, even though it's really a dark fantasy. It plays a lot of the conceits of Walking Dead and like Shutter Island, and so the thing with the 5th issue and the second arc is breaking it from this very small story about a guy who wakes up in an apocalypse, has to escape an asylum, and then sort of like survive into this big fantasy world. And that was the hardest part of writing the 5th issue, was getting people to buy in to the fact that, like, we are not in a horror book. We're in a dark fantasy book, which is fantasy with horror elements, not a horror story, which is sort of what
right.
we had been telling for 4 issues.
When that guy was hanging out the window from that other guy's guts that he had cut out of his body, I just assumed that we were going the horror route from the beginning, and then it kind of took this turn. Dr. Butler leading an army of the undead, and then with Necromonica and the Necronomicon and stuff like that, it all started to kind of feel more adventurous. In that case, then became more in a fantasy kind of realm in of itself. So
And a combination of horror subgenres.
right. So then it started to bring it all together for me. With issue 5, as far as what you were trying to say, as far as this fantasy world that you're building.
Trying to convey.
Right. So I see that coming out now, definitely, which is I think is going to be exciting. It sounds like you're excited to write it, and I'm definitely excited to read it.
I wanted to tell a story that centers around hope and
Right.
magic and redemption and plays with the Chosen One narrative, and I cannot be happier with how issue 5 and 6 turn out. And I just hope that the people that read it and love the first volume also love the second volume.
We just wanted to real quick interject on the Kickstarter itself. What you have a Kickstarter going on currently. It's going to be ending soon, though. Am I correct? Like in the next couple days?
It ends on Thursday, October 3rd at 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time.
Okay, and
So,
and what are we looking at here? We need what's the donation, so to speak, platforms that we're looking at as far as the tier levels?
well, the book is the book needs $15,666 to fund. We currently have right around $14,000. When I looked right before this, we had like $13,950. So we're just about $1,600 from funding.
Okay,
All right, you're almost there.
In the
good. Maybe we can push that towards push it over the
Baseline.
edge. Yeah, that's what we want.
I
So
hope so. I mean, we've got a very short amount of time, but
Right.
luckily we have that push hopefully at the end.
We understand. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask all our Real Shortbox fans to do what I call a Real Shortbox surge, and do your part and try to help this man finish off his Kickstarter
definitely
campaign.
check out his Kickstarter. It's under what name? It's under your name?
Well, you can just look up Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter #5 or go to bit.ly/Ichabod5. You can get issue 1 to 4, issue 5, issue 6, digital of issue 7 and 8. You can get my back catalog stuff. You can get we have 5 graphic novels also. 3 other graphic novels and two anthologies. We have a book called Cthulhu is Hard to Spell, which is very popular from our Ichabod. It's 35 stories about the gods and monsters of Lovecraft.
Uh-huh.
Monsters and Other Scary Shit. My book, Katrina Hates the Dead. Pixie Dust, plus Ichabod. All of my digital novels. There's I think something like 65 or something pledge classes right now. You can get drawn into the book. You can get coaching with me. I run a company called The Complete Creative, which helps creators build better businesses. There's all sorts of amazing prizes.
Well, Russell, I want to thank you very much for joining us. It was really great to get a lot of clarification on this story, and of course, we wish you the best of luck, sir.
Yes, thank you very much, sir.
Thanks so much.
All right, you have a great night.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
You too.
Take care.
Thanks. All right. Well,
That was a very enlightening talk.
yeah, no, it was great to talk to Mr. Nohelty and get a whole strew of information about Ichabod Jones, which I have to say, it's a rather complex book, and it's very interesting.
I didn't understand anything at first when I read the first part of the first chapter of the novel. I knew where I was at, and then I read the second one, and I was completely lost. What I have to say to people that are in that same boat when they do read this, just give it some time. It gets into the third and the fourth chapter. It starts to make a little more sense. It's nonsensical in a way. It just is. It's going back and forth into these realms. It's like Lost. They started doing the flashbacks, the flash forwards, then the flash sidewayses.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to have to do a little bit
have to be a
of
patient reader.
creative adjustments, so to speak, when you're reading something like this. It is more complex than I would have thought that it would have been going into it, just reading the title. But it's still very entertaining, very fun, but very dark in a fantasy world.
And also, this proves that comic books just aren't for kids. A lot of people think that comic books are just very simple, but they forget that there's many...
Not all comic books are for kids.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. The comic book stories are coming in great varieties, just like any novel. And this kind of proves that. It shows you a complex story written by a complex writer.
Yeah, and hopefully it gets, to print up some of these new Ichabod Jones stories, and they might possibly land in a particular comic shop.
Yes. The place that it lands at is a great place that we love going to.
Spiro's Heroes. I just picked up some great books there this past weekend. Again.
So did I.
Again.
So did I.
Donald
Kevin did too.
picked up an edition for me of Zot.
Oh my goodness.
Zot.
A real short box favorite. It's a different kind of book.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think we're going to call it there simply because we're out of time.
We're out of time. But you don't have to be out of time.
No.
You can always find us on YouTube,
Spreaker,
Yeah, of course, iTunes.
Spotify.
and Google Play Music as well.
Yeah, those are generally the preferred platforms. I mean, we have others, but do you really want to know those? I think that those should cover everything.
Right.
Thank you so much once again for joining us. My name is Darren.
My name is Supreme Chancellor Kevin.
And I'm Councilman Donald. I don't know where I'm with that. And,
Who wants to be a councilman?
I don't know, but you know what? Maybe you'll see me, and if not, maybe we'll see you.
At the Righteous Comic Shop.
With Viceroy, Darren.